webinar that will focus on recent changes to postal regulations with a particular focus on the UK and the Czech Republic. Before we get started, I'd like to quickly give you some information. So if my colleague can go to the next slide. Voila. So this is a screenshot of the interface that you should see on your computer or your phone, whatever. So in the below the arrow A, you have our questions tab where you can send us your questions in writing. We will collect them and try to address as much as possible after the webinar during the Q&A sessions. And of course, if we don't have time to answer your questions, then we will reply by email as you always do. And below the arrow B, you have the documentation tab where you can find the slides from this webinar and also some documentation. And at the end of the webinar, you will also see a short survey to give your feedback, which is very important to us to improve for future events, but also because for each feedback we receive, I think you know it by now, we will plant a tree. Now I would like to introduce my colleagues that are with me in Brussels today. We first have my colleague Armen. Michael, if you can. Well. So Armen leads our research on postal regulation in Europe. He rejoined Cullen International in 2023 after working on regulation and market access in the satellite communication sector. We also have Jan Cizar from Czech Republic, who so Jan follows telecoms, postal, and digital economy regulation in several European countries. And before joining Cullen International in 2013, he was a regulatory economist at Telefonica in Czech Republic. And finally, we have Michael Van Maris, who will be moderating the discussion today. And he follows regulation of the postal sector in Belgium and Austria, and also of sustainability sector in the EU. I think that's it for me now. So I will pass the floor to Michael, Armen, and Jan, and I will come back later for the Q&A session.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of our attendants and welcome to this Cullen International webinar. As Sarah said, my name is Michael, and today, together with my colleagues Jan and Armen, we will be having a discussion on recent changes in European postal regulation. Our talk will take up to 40 minutes, including some time for any of your questions at the end. Before we start, I would love to introduce Cullen International, our company. We are a regulatory intelligence provider in several communication sectors, including telecoms, media, digital economy, and of course, postal. We also follow developments in sustainability regulation. For 40 years now, we have been delivering comprehensive, neutral, unbiased, and timely regulatory information and analysis that is trusted by our clients, both in industry and government institutions. So our aim today is to provide you with a broad overview of recent changes to postal regulations in certain selected European countries, before then diving into the key aspects of changes to the postal law in the Czech Republic and USO reform in the United Kingdom, both of which were adopted in 2025. Before we start talking about that, as many of you will know, the postal sector is regulated at EU level by the Postal Services Directive, also known as the PSD. And under Article 3 of this PSD, EU member states must ensure that users enjoy the right to a universal service, which involves the permanent provision of a postal service of a specified quality at all points in the territory and at affordable prices for all users. However, underneath this umbrella of regulation, shall we say, member states have the right to define the postal universal services, the universal service obligation, also known as the USO, differently. So they have this level of flexibility. And then adding to that, under Article 5 of the PSD, EU member states are required to ensure that the universal service provision evolves in response to technical, economic, social environment developments, as well as changes in the needs of users over time. So the current PSD dates back to 2008. This is now 18 years ago, so quite a long time, coming up on 20 years. So it's not at all surprising that several member states have started to reconsider the scope and nature of their USOs, given the fundamental market changes that have taken place since that year. In particular, of course, considering the steady decline in letter mail and the emergence of e-commerce driven parcels as becoming almost the main business for postal operators. So the next slide, which I'm going to show you, shows the dates of the current postal laws across some of the 22 European countries which we cover. And it also shows any significant changes historically. And I think what's interesting about this slide is that it shows that most of the existing postal laws in the EU date back to around 2009 to 2011. So back to that first period where the PSD was being transposed by member states a long time ago. However, we see that in 2025, two countries from our coverage introduced new postal regulations. So the Czech Republic and the United Kingdom, which my colleagues will discuss a little bit later. And also in the last month, new postal rules came into effect in Italy. So given that we don't have someone here speaking about Italy, and it is a little bit more recent, I thought I would very quickly take you through some of these developments in Italy, not in much detail, but at a high level.
But that may be a subject for our next year.
But maybe next year, because as I will say in a bit, there are some ongoing developments concerning Italy as well. So yes, so as I said, in Italy, so Italy amended its postal law. It did this through the instrument of the Italian budget law of 30 December 2025, which itself followed a review carried out by the regulator called AGCOM in Italy, the postal regulator. In particular, what this amendment did is it removed priority letters from the USO as of this month, 2026. And it also changed ordinary letters so that it now needs to be delivered in D+5, meaning 5 days after sending, rather than D+4 previously. So removed priority letters from the USO completely and made standard letters take slightly longer. Aside from this, what's interesting is that it widened the definition of what an access point is under the USO by quite a bit, so that it now can include third-party locations. Crucially, also third-party parcel shops, which is an interesting development, especially considering the explosion of these kind of parcel shop networks all over Europe. And then finally, it also changed some rules related to USO financing. It's now no longer possible through an industry compensation fund, only through state funding. And finally, it raised the possible fines for USO breaches by the USP. Okay, so that was Italy. Now zooming back out a little bit and talking about the main trends which have happened in the EU regarding changes in the USO. Oh, sorry, there was one more thing to ask. Sorry, this is breaking news. So again, in Italy, currently AGCOM is undergoing a consultation reacting to these changes in the USO. And in particular, these the main subject, shall we say, is changes in the quality of service standards. But what's interesting about it is that it goes quite a bit further, and it also asks stakeholders some questions about whether these QoS standards should also cover alternative operators, not just Poste Italiane. It asks them about whether there should be obligations regarding delivery to pickup and delivery points, parcel lockers, this type of thing, as well as a range of other measures to ensure delivery reliability. So this is something that we just covered in our service. We wrote, our colleague Peter wrote a very good flash about this, and we will continue, as this develops, we will continue to cover it, of course. So yes, so now I can move on to some of the more longer term trends, shall we say, at the EU level in the changing USO. I think this slide shows quite well that most changes that we see in European countries in recent years is to remove elements from the USO scope. So we see direct and bulk mail is often removed in different countries, and then in very rare cases we also see that elements are added. But this is a rare case, and it's usually because of the very specific market of those countries. Other changes that we see frequently is that we see places like Finland and Norway, we see an increase in the flexibility allowed in terms of the frequency of collecting and delivery of postal items. And we also see in many other countries similar changes or refocusing quality standards away from speed of delivery and more focusing on reliability. So not making sure that the letters and parcels arrive quickly, but making sure that most of them arrive, or all of them actually arrive at a certain point, making the focus based on this. And I think this will come up a little bit later when we talk about some of these countries. A very quick word about who is next, because the countries aren't necessarily standing still. The Netherlands is the latest country to consider changing its postal regulation, which would come in the form of an amendment to a ministerial postal decision, so not an amendment to the postal law. And under this proposal, quality of service targets for regular letters would be changed from 95% having to arrive next day, as of which is the situation now. It would be loosened to 90% in 2 days as of July 2026, so quite soon. And then a year later, this would be reduced even more. It would change to 92% in 3 days. So the idea is that over the course of 2 years, the obligation on the USP would be slightly reduced over years. But at the moment, it's still a proposal, but we await this any day now, the final decision to release this ministerial decision. And of course, underneath all this, there is, of course, the promised revision of the Postal Services Directive, the upcoming EU Delivery Act, with the Commission's timeline promising that they will publish a proposal in the 3rd quarter of this year. So this is all happening in the background of these individual changes in different countries. Okay, so having covered some of the background, it is now my pleasure to hand over to our colleague Jan, who will go into a little bit more detail on postal regulation in the Czech Republic. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you, Michael. It's my pleasure to be here with you. Today we will learn about the recent changes to the Postal Universal Service in the Czech Republic. Our first point is to explain the reasons which led to these changes. I point out 2 postal items: letters and parcels. The volume of traditional postal items, letters, has decreased by 42% over recent years. Electronic communications have largely replaced those services. There is less postal usage because individuals are using emails and smartphone apps to communicate. In addition, both the public and private sectors are required to use so-called data mailboxes for official correspondence, and the service is free of charge. On the contrary, the parcel market is growing by nearly 400% from 2021 to 2024. New entrants have invested and deployed their own postal infrastructure across the country. Now, we will see the phenomenon of parcel lockers, as these are the game changers. What is a parcel locker? It's a secure, automated self-service box. It's used for the delivery of packages, allowing recipients to pick them up 24/7. Parcel lockers are powered and connected to the internet, which enables recipients to access their parcels comfortably. It's important to know that the number of parcel lockers has grown 6 times in the Czech Republic over past years. The COVID lockdown was the trigger for this parcel delivery pattern because people couldn't be in physical contact. These postal market trends led the government and postal regulator to react. My next slide is about changes to the country's postal law. The 2025 amendment to the Czech postal law increased funding of the universal service by 33%. Now it's approximately 80 million euros per year. This is the maximum amount the government can pay for the universal service provision. In previous years, Czech Post, the universal service provider, claimed that its cost burden was significantly higher than the amount the government could have reimbursed. For many years, the legal framework had been rigid, and the government couldn't increase the universal service funding to cover the cost. This changed with this year. Now it's time to discuss the scope of the universal service. The Czech postal regulator designated Czech Post as the universal service provider for 5 years, from 2025 to 2029. The regulator again excluded domestic parcels up to 10 kilograms from the scope. The parcel service only includes international parcels up to 10 kilograms. Also, it reduced the obligation for the category of postal letters and packets up to 2 kilograms. The maximum weight is restricted to 1 kilogram with some maximum dimensions. Some services remain unchanged. Czech Post is still obliged to deliver cash and make money transfers to bank accounts and deliver postal items for blind people. In addition, the government, not the regulator, reduced the number of mandatory post offices by 10% back in 2023. And now we will see how the Czech Post and the regulator calculate the cost of universal service. Czech Post calculates the cost first, and then the regulator carries out checks and reimburses the cost from the central government budget. In previous years, the law kept the reimbursed cost at approximately 60 million euros. That was approximately 75% of the calculated cost. Therefore, it was not financially sustainable for Czech Post. With raised funding, the reimbursed cost corresponds to approximately 100% of the calculated cost. Now the government can pay for what it demands. However, there's an administrative barrier which leads us into notification to the European Commission. The reimbursement of the universal service cost is subject to approval by the European Commission that checks whether this is compatible with state aid rules. The European Commission approved the reimbursement for the whole designation period, 5 years, with a maximum cap per year that was valid until the end of 2025. Therefore, the point is that the regulator cannot reimburse the universal service cost to the Czech Post up to the current and increased amount. As a result, the country started re-notification to the European Commission early this year. You may find interesting that last week, some members of the Czech Parliament proposed in a draft law to decrease the maximum amount back to the previous level. Why is that? Because the European Commission approved the reimbursement in line with the old law, and Czech Post would be reimbursed for 2025. Let me conclude today's story with 3 takeaways. 1, the transformation of the Czech postal market continues. 2, the amended postal law raised the US funding from January 2026. 3, the regulator reduced the scope of postal universal service in 2025. That was my story about the changes to the Czech postal universal service.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you. That was very, very thorough and very interesting. Also, that apparently it's still a live issue. They might reverse all these, or some of these changes at least.
Indeed.
So thank you very much, Jan. And now, Armin, if you could take us through the change in the United Kingdom, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Jan. And this is quite interesting. And hello again, everyone. I hope you're still with us. And let's dive into the USO changes taking place in the UK. since 2025. So as we can see it happening in many countries, not only in Europe, but also around the world, the UK has witnessed a significant drop in its traditional mail volumes in the past 10 to 15 years. Traditional letter volumes have decreased by half since 2011, when the UK adopted its current Postal Services Act. So this decline has put at risk the long-term sustainability of the Postal Universal Service, as well as the financial position of the USP Royal Mail. So with these considerations in mind, the regulator Ofcom stepped on the path of reforming the USO, concluding in its analysis that modifications to the USO specification would still meet the reasonable needs of postal users. Ofcom also estimated that the USO changes, if implemented properly, would allow Royal Mail to realize net cost savings in the range of around 250 million to 425 million pounds in the financial year 2025-26. According to the regulator, this net cost savings as a result of the reduced delivery frequency would enable Royal Mail to invest in and eventually improve its quality of service performance. Just to remind that the regulator Ofcom fined Royal Mail several times for failure to meet its delivery quality of service targets in recent years. And after extensive consultations with relevant stakeholders, including Royal Mail, Ofcom adopted its final decision in a July 2025 statement. Interestingly enough, the USO modifications did not require changes to the primary law, that is, to the Postal Services Act, but to several pieces of secondary legislation applicable to the Universal Postal Service, namely the Universal Postal Service Order, the designated USP Condition 1, and the USP Access Conditions. The entry into force date of USO changes was 28 July 2025, with the exception of the new quality of service targets, which came into effect on 1 April this year. So before getting into the USO changes themselves, let's briefly look at the UK's postal market in 2024-2025. So letter mail volumes declining and parcel volumes rising were of no surprise. However, letter volumes went down at a slightly slower rate than in the preceding year, which was likely due to the general election in the UK in 2025. In its turn, letter revenues went up slightly, and this was due to increasing letter prices. For information, in 2025 in the UK, the cheapest first-class letter tariff was £1.70, which was close to €2, while the cheapest second-class letter cost £0.87, slightly more than €1, which were still among the lowest prices for domestic letters in Europe. Parcel revenues decreased, which was attributed to strong competition and existence of reasonably priced parcel services in the parcels delivery segment. So Royal Mail, the USP, has been struggling to maintain a sustainable universal service against the background of continuously decreasing letter volumes. In 2025, the postal operators universal service business reported a negative profit margin of minus 0.2%. So the anticipation of changes to the USO had been in the air for several years, and it eventually took place in 2025. So on the next couple of slides, you will see key modifications to the USO compared with regulatory requirements before the change was adopted. So in terms of frequency of delivery, second-class letters no longer have to be delivered 6 days a week, Monday to Saturday, but on alternate weekdays only, Monday to Friday, with no Saturday deliveries. Bulk or so-called access letters, which comprise the majority of all letters, excuse me, all letters in the UK, are also to be delivered on a less frequent basis. For D+5 access service, delivery will now take place on 5 days a week, as opposed to the previous 6 days a week. In addition to the D+5 access service, a new D+3 access service for bulk letters was introduced, with the delivery frequency coinciding with that of second-class letters, that is on alternate weekdays, Monday to Friday. Regarding the quality of service targets, Royal Mail claimed on numerous occasions that the old targets were unrealistic to achieve. As it was already mentioned, the USP was fined by the regulator for missing its quality of service targets for several years in a row, both for first-class and second-class letters, with the latest penalty of £21 million for the financial year 2024-25. So the USO reform also relaxed the mandatory quality of service standards for both first-class and second-class letters, and also for first-class postcode areas, as you can see on this slide. For those of you who are new to Cullen International, we have dedicated cross-country benchmarks on these and many other topics related to postal regulation. On top of these primary targets for quality of service, the UK's 2025 USO reform also put in place secondary or so-called tail of mail targets for quality of service for both first class and second class mail. These are presented on this slide. These were introduced to reflect the postal consumers' ongoing and increasing preference for reliability over speed of delivery, a trend that can be observed nowadays in many other countries. And again, if you would like to familiarize yourself with our Cullen International's regulatory intelligence on these and other topics, check out our comparative analysis of more than 20 European countries. Apart from these amendments to the USO, certain USO-related conditions remained unchanged as vitally important for postal users in the UK, such as 6 days a week delivery, Monday to Saturday for first-class letters, 5 days a week delivery for USO parcels, price cap on second-class letters, and the next review of price cap will take place before March 2027. The universal pricing for USO postal items across the entire country, and regulation of the D+2 access service for priority bulk letters. So these were unchanged by the USO reform took place last year. Uh, As part of its statutory duty, Ofcom, the regulator, will continue its postal market monitoring activities, including Royal Mail's performance, especially in light of the implementation of a new alternate day delivery model and compliance with the new quality of service targets. So obviously, time will need to pass before any conclusions can be made about the effectiveness of the adopted USO reform. The ultimate aim of the reform was to ensure the long-term sustainability of the postal universal service. So it remains to be seen whether the modified USO rules will help to achieve the intended policy objectives. This is it from my side.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Very interesting. And thank you for such a thorough explanation of why the changes were necessary and then why, or were deemed to be necessary, and then, yeah, the full reform of the USO and the UK. I think it's interesting. I mean, obviously, Czech Republic, UK, very different countries, different postal markets, but both identify this issue with the sustainability of the USO is ultimately what it's about, and then also two different approaches in the Czech Republic, changing the actual primary legislation, arguably perhaps more fundamental changes to the scope, taking out parcels or most parcels from the scope. These are quite fundamental changes. The big focus on funding, and then the United Kingdom, a big focus on quality of service, delivery times, etc., etc. It's will continue. Exactly. I'm sure we will continue to see these types of changes throughout Europe. But it's very interesting to see them next to each other and to contrast them in this way. So thank you again very much. I thought I would conclude with a very quick overview of where we are at with the new EU Delivery Act. I mentioned it a little bit earlier that this is the act that's supposed to either replace or supplement the existing PSD.
CBPR?
And the CBPR as well, of course, we should not forget. Yeah, cross-border parcel regulation. As we said earlier, the earliest possible adoption signaled by the Commission is the third quarter of this year. That might be a little bit optimistic or ambitious, but we will see. What we do know is that the Commission consulted on this new act between 11 December 2025 and 8 March 2026. And only a week or two ago, it published its summary of its responses that it received from stakeholders, which was quite varied, I have to say, obviously depending on the position of the different stakeholders, whether they are operators, whether they are regulators, whether they are consumer groups. They all have a slightly different vision on where the EU postal market should go. But there was a broad consensus that there should still be a minimum USO within a framework. I mean, there was a big request for clarity. So clarity, what postal terms mean, what exactly the framework covers. So yeah, we'll see. We will be covering any more information as it comes in. So hopefully this is an exciting time for us to cover regulation.
And for the postal sector.
And for the postal sector, of course. So all that's left for me to do is to thank you again for your interesting contributions, and then to open the floor back up to Sarah in case there have been any questions from our audience.
Yeah, thank you to the three of you for this very interesting overview. Before we go to the questions and before everybody leaves, I want to just to remind you that after the webinar, you will have the very small feedback form. Please give us your feedback so we can plant trees. And also we will have a two-day training in Brussels dedicated to postal regulation. It will be in November, on 18 and 19 of November. And well, it will be very soon open to registrations, and you might receive a small gift in your emails regarding this training.
Oh,
wow.
Not saying more. Stay tuned. Voila. And yeah, I like to do that. So yeah, so we have some questions. I suggest I will read them, and then Michael, you can say who should reply to those questions. So the first one, well, this one is obvious. It will be for Armen, I think. How has Royal Mail adapted to the new rules?
Thank you, Sarah. And this is a completely valid question. So after the USO reform took place, Royal Mail has undertaken pilots of a new alternate day delivery model in different delivery offices across the country. And fairly recently, the USP also published its quality improvement plan for the Universal Postal Service, which includes that in between May and December 2026, starting recently, the USP, the postal operator, will have phased approach for implementation or rollout of a new alternate day delivery model across 1,200 delivery offices throughout the country. Last but not least, this USO reform was agreed between the USP and the postal sector's workers union, communication workers union, CWU, recently in mid-April. And one of the aspects of this agreement between the trade union and the postal operator was that there won't be any compulsory redundancies as a consequence of the reduced delivery frequency towards an alternate day delivery model. So yeah, just briefly.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Royal Mail had the right to make these changes earlier, but they had to agree with the trade union before. Okay, and that was sort of the
yeah. Thanks.
Which
Thanks,
makes sense because it does involve quite a bit. Well, I mean, imagine it involves a huge change to the way that work is done, and yeah, they would have to
this is indeed a
secure
huge
certain
change.
guarantees. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, before I go to the next question, we have a question regarding the slides, if they will be shared. So yes, you can download them from the documentation tab here directly from this platform, but we will also send them by email right after the webinar. So yes, you have access to the presentation. And you will also, and the recording, yeah, so you can watch it over and over again. Voila. So the next question we have is how often do member states change their USO on average?
I can take this one,
Sure.
Michael, if you wish. So this is an interesting question, and going back to the beginning of our presentation, where Michael stated that there is a PSD which sets the rules governing the EU postal sector, saying that the universal service needs to evolve in response to social, economic, technical developments, and according to the needs of users. And member states are still allowed to derogate from this, EU-wide rules to a certain degree, but the European Commission, the Council have encouraged member states not to increase this level of derogations. But as we can see it happening, it's inevitable with this dramatic and continuous decline in letter volumes. It's inevitable that member states could not maintain the level of the universal service, whether it is a scope or the features of the USO at the previous level. So they need to do anything about it. And so as we see, quite a lot of member states have gone towards amending their USO. So how frequently, it's interesting. It remains up to a member state to decide, obviously. But once we have the EU Delivery Act in place, hopefully it will set revised rules of the game for the whole sector, not only the USP, but for other postal service providers.
If I may just add to that, there's also, of course, every member state has transposed the USO standards in different ways. And
Absolutely.
some of them will do a portion in the national law, and then another portion in ministerial decisions or other secondary legislation. And there's an obvious difference in how difficult it is to get political will to change one. Often the process of changing the national law is more difficult than the process of
Exactly.
changing secondary legislation. So that also differs a little bit on the approach that member states initially took. I mean, this is very unscientific, but when I look at our little graph that we have, it seems like maybe around 2017, 2018, you saw more member states try to change quality of.
You can go back.
Well,
Okay.
I don't know if I want to click back at 20 times, but this is very unscientific. But there does seem to be an acceleration in change. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Well,
Any question for Jan?
yeah, well, one for the three of you. It's one that keeps coming back whenever we do a postal webinar. Can you guess?
Wow.
So,
EU Delivery Act?
bravo. So, yeah, any insight into the new EU Delivery Act? So, Armen, I give you the floor because you guessed the question.
I think we already covered a little bit that we're not sure.
Just to add that our colleagues has recently attended a conference on postal and delivery economics and policy hosted by the European University Institute in Cologne early May. And one of the commission officials participating in this conference stated that possibly the proposal for the new EU Delivery Act might not come earlier than next year. So we are eagerly waiting for the developments, but as Michael already stated, we're not sure.
Yes, I mean, my impression from this conference was that you could try to read between the lines, but there was still a lot up in the air, to be honest. It's still not certain if it's going to be a directive or a regulation, and the exact approach and even the timeline isn't quite clear yet, unfortunately. So not very satisfying. I feel like we never give a satisfying answer to this. But
but feel free to check our flash on the Commission's summary of the stakeholder responses to the consultation on the EU Delivery Act, where we tried to wrap up opinions by the ERGP, the European Regulators Group for Postal Services, reflecting on the postal regulators' opinions. And vis-a-vis this, we also covered postal operators' opinion as presented by Post Europe in its contribution. And one last thing, perhaps, if any draft proposal for the EU Delivery Act comes up before our masterclass, as Sarah mentioned, in mid-November this year, our program, masterclasses program, will need to be reshaped considerably. So stay tuned and welcome to attend our masterclass.
Yeah. And in any case, if the EU Delivery Act comes, we will do a webinar too, probably.
That'll promise.
Yeah. Michael, do we have time for another questions? We have other questions. Some are quite long to read, so we might take these to reply by email.
It's been 45 minutes. Do we have time for one more, perhaps, and then, or shall we answer by email?
Just to reassure the audience that we will answer all the questions by email in follow-up emails, and perhaps as a bonus, we're already exceeding the time limit. Sarah, you can pick one short question, perhaps.
Well, do you think that the general direction of travel is now to move away from industry-funded compensation schemes?
That's
a tricky one.
That's interesting. The short answer to this question, it remains to a member state to decide.
It depends.
It depends, yeah, even shorter.
Yes.
Michael, any
No, I mean,
reflections?
I would have to look. We have done some research on the funding mechanisms across different countries. I don't have the exact breakdown across the countries we focus on at top of mind at the moment, but it's we'll get back to you maybe with some more detail. But it's always difficult to select whether there is a direction of travel. You know, given the diversity across Europe, it's interesting enough that it's already happening in Italy. So yeah, but we'll get back to you with a little bit more
compensation fund, right? From top of my memory, as far as I can remember from our research, only rare European countries currently apply U.S. compensation fund to compensate postal operators for their universal service net costs.
Yes.
But whether it would be changing, it remains to be seen.
Yes.
So another thing to be stay tuned.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, then in this case, I think we will reply to the other questions by email. And the only thing that's left for me is to thank you, Armen, Michael, and Jan, for this very interesting webinar. And yeah, just again, a reminder to give us feedback, please, and to stay tuned for more information on our postal masterclass. So you can already save the date. We will soon open registrations, and when that happens, you will receive a small gift from us in your mailbox. And then hurry, because we have limited seats. So first come, first serve, as usual. And yeah, that's it for me.
Many
Voilà.
thanks to everyone
very
from
much.
the audience. Huh?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.